Okay. Well, good morning, everybody that's here in person. Good morning, everybody that's online. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started here on this bright sunny morning. A little chilly out here, but hopefully everybody at home has their jammies still on and sitting in front of the fire somewhere. But what a beautiful day here at Splash. Welcome. My name's Mark. How many of you guys have been here before? Okay, so about half the room, and half of you guys are brand new. Welcome. Thanks for coming. My name is Mark. I'm the pond guy around here. I started the business about 30-some years ago, back in the late 80s, and I went to school for landscape architecture. And the creations that you see behind us here, as far as how they work and things like that, we didn't learn in school. We really didn't. You know, this was something that just became a passion, you know, over a number of years, and we started perfecting what we do, and we're constantly learning how to do it better and better. And so what you see behind us today with crystal clear water, happy, healthy fish, and just these beautiful creations is something that has been an evolution, if you will, of learning how to do it better and better. And so today what I wanted to share with you is all the dumb stuff that we did early on, so that way you can avoid the learning curve that we had to go through that way. So how many of you guys have a pond? I'm assuming everybody, you know, pretty much. Do you have a pond or not yet? Okay, cool. So we usually get a great, you know, mix of people. We are monitoring questions online, so as we go through here, you know, type in your question, and we'll try to get it answered. And same for you guys here. If you have a question about what we're talking about, just raise your hand, interrupt me, and we can go down whatever road you want to go down. I learned just as much as you guys do at every one of these. I've been teaching these for almost 2 decades now, so we have a lot to share, and our goal is to make ponding as easy as possible for you, so that way you can sit back and enjoy the pond and not have to work in it, you know, that way. So let's start off kind of talking a little bit about our orientation and what we do today when we design and build ponds, and then you can kind of compare and contrast, you know, if your pond is similar to this, or if you're missing, you know, one of these pieces, etc. So over the past 30 years, a lot has changed. When we first started building ponds back in the late 80s, you know, we would dig a hole, throw a rubber liner in there, do some beautiful rock work around it, create a beautiful waterfall. But we would actually put the pump on the very bottom of the pond. And so obviously, where else would you put the pump but in the bottom of the pond? But what happened was the pump would clog because you're sucking all that debris down to there. You'd have to put on your scuba gear and dive down to the bottom of the pond and get rid of all that muck and debris that was building up on the bottom of the pond. They were high maintenance. They were a lot of work to take care of. And so today, you know, we actually use skimmers on all of our ponds. So it's technology that was kind of adopted from the swimming pool industry. You see a swimming pool, they have those little cutouts in the walls all around. Those are the skimmers. So it was the mid-90s that Greg Whitstock from Aquascape built his first pond with a swimming pool skimmer. He took a garbage can, took a swimming pool faceplate, and that was the first skimmer. Today, the skimmer that you see behind me here is the latest generation. It has a cool fake rock lid on the top of it, and then the skimmer itself has a locking door on the front. In operation, the water level in the pond's about here. The water and debris gets sucked into here. All the debris gets caught in this basket. You empty out the basket and you rehang it. Inside the skimmer is another little filter mat inside there, and that catches all the fine debris. And so the skimmer, if it's designed properly, is going to get 80 to 90% of the debris out of the pond before the pond even knew what hit it. So we're building this beautiful ecosystem. We want it to look like nature. In nature, the mountains come down, melt, the snow melts, and just washes all that debris out. In our closed system, that doesn't happen, so we have to help it out. And so the very first thing that we look at when it comes to pond filtration and keeping the fish happy and the water crystal clear is getting rid of that debris before it has a chance to even interact with the pond. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. So the skimmer is the very first thing. So back to my example of putting the pump on the bottom of the pond. Early 90s, when the skimmers first came around, we took the pump from the bottom of the pond, we put it into the skimmer, and now all of a sudden all that debris, instead of going to the bottom, gets sucked into the skimmer basket, and we can just easily empty it out. So how many people have a skimmer? Okay, so about half of you. So that's awesome. that is the #1 retrofit that we do when we're going out to work on ponds that we didn't build, is actually just putting a skimmer on. And so if you have a skimmer, and you can look at to see whether it's working properly or not, is throw a leaf way on the far side of the pond and just see how long it takes it to get into the skimmer basket, and look for ways to improve that. So if there are plants between the waterfall and the skimmer, we love plants, but thin them out so that way you have a nice little pathway going in there. But that's the key. Last week you probably started to see pollen sitting on the top of the car. So I went out whatever morning it was before winter came back, and just saw that whole thing of pollen. That gets in the pond 24/7, and so when we're skimming, we want to skim that off 24/7. So that's the first half of filtering the pond. The second half, if you look at our ecosystem graphic here, the skimmer's sitting over here. Opposite the skimmers are biofilter. And so just real briefly, last week we talked all about, really in detail about all these pieces. But the biofilter is this guy right here. And so our biofilter, the plumbing comes into the backside and flows up through the filter and then over this lip, and that creates our waterfall back into the pond. This waterfall adds tons of oxygen to the pond, so the beneficial bacteria, the fish, the plants, everybody loves using oxygen, and that's how we get our oxygen in the pond. But what happens down deep in this in the biofilter, as I take it apart here, is down inside here. You see there's a swirl chamber. So that first area right there, it's just an open space. So the water comes rushing into there. It settles down. It slows down, and then it'll flow up through these filter mats and then bioballs. All this is just nooks and crannies to grow beneficial bacteria and enzymes. So this is not designed to be a physical filter, meaning that all the physical filtering we're going to do in the pond is in the skimmer. This is biological, meaning that beneficial bacteria and enzymes colonize over all of this stuff here. When you buy these pads from us, they're white. They should never be white again. They should be like brown and goopy, filled with bacteria and enzymes. The more bacteria and enzymes that we have in here, the more fish waste that's converted to ammonia, gets converted to nitrates, So that whole science lesson that happens in here depends on beneficial bacteria. The more that we have, the more we can process. So people always ask me, well, my pond is 10 by 10. How many fish can I have in my pond? It's like, I don't know. Let's talk about how big your biofilter is, and then we can see how much fish waste and things like that you can process. So if you put a huge biofilter on a tiny pond, you can handle a lot more fish than if you had a big pond with a tiny biofilter. So that makes sense. How many of you guys have seen the pond that we built at the UPMC hospital over here? A couple of you, yeah. So the biofilter on that pond is 20 feet by 40 feet. So it's just this massive, so it's about the area that you guys are sitting in. That pond is 100 feet long. And so we wanted something over there that's absolutely bulletproof. And so we just made it absolutely massive. Obviously, it's not a molded unit like this. It's just a custom built unit that does the exact same thing. So, yes?
Does that filter need changed out more?
Yeah, so great question. So in here, we have bioballs. So they'll last forever. This mesh bag here, maybe every 10 years you're going to replace it because it breaks down through the sun. These filter mats, usually we say every 2 years, maybe 3 years you'll get out of it and then replace the filter mats. We have black filter mats and green ones, all kinds of different ones. The black ones last, maybe 3 to 5, and the green is probably 5 to 7. So you would replace them every once in a while, just when they start to deteriorate or shrink or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, so how often do you clean these and how do you clean these? So keep in mind, what we said happens in here. This is beneficial. This is a bacteria house, so the bacteria is growing on these. Every time we clean these, we're killing off the bacteria that's doing a job of cleaning the pond. So in our ecosystems, we tell people never touch these. Just never touch them. Leave it in here. Once a year, you can pull it up and rinse it off. And so right now, like this time of year, our team is going out cleaning a whole bunch of ponds for the spring. That's the only time of year that we recommend touching these guys at all. So just rinse them off real quick and put them right back down in. So if you clean them off in season, let's say, they look kind of goopy or gross, and you rinse them off, your pond might turn pea soup green within a week or two. because the green water algae loves to eat nitrites. But in our filter here, we're actually starving that algae by feeding the nitrites to bacteria. So if we kill off that bacteria, the bacteria still gets consumed by something else. So it gets consumed by green water algae. So don't rinse these very often. Make sense? Awesome. Okay. So once a year we rinse those down, put everything back down in, and then just real quick on the wrap up the science lesson there is the plant tray. So the plant tray sits on top here, and then we plant different plants in here. So the science lesson is ammonia gets converted into nitrites, nitrites get converted into nitrates, and then the plants suck out all the nitrates. So we get rid of the ammonia, so the fish are happy. We get rid of the nitrites, so your water is crystal clear. And then we get rid of the nitrates with all these other plants to reduce all the stringy, fuzzy type algae. And that's, if you look at all the ponds behind us here, that's how it works. If you look at the hospital pond, that's how it works. We build acre-sized lakes. It's the same lesson. If you've had aquariums, it's kind of the same lesson. Make sense? Cool. Awesome. All right. So that is skimming and biological filtration. 101. You guys have passed. There'll be a test later. But that's kind of, the way the system is supposed to work. This is the lowest maintenance system that we have on the market. So I was happy to see most everybody has a skimmer, out there. So that being said, a lot of times people in the wintertime kind of neglect the pond. The leaves come in, they're building up. You turn your skimmer off for whatever reason, and the leaves start to build up a little bit more. With this system here, if you're super meticulous with the pond, you can probably get away with every 3 to 5 years with not doing a really deep spring cleaning. But at a minimum, we say, hey, every 3 years, do a cleaning. We have some customers that we do a deep cleaning every single year. And what we do on that is we'll actually set up a big temporary tank next to the pond. We'll take a big pump. We'll pump all the water out of the pond into that tank. We'll move all your fish into that, and now we can get down into the pond again. So we can we take big 3-inch fire hoses, and we're volume washing the whole pond. So what we're trying to do is to get that debris that's built up behind the rocks and throughout the winter and things like that. We want to get that out of the pond. So our spring cleaning, and if you're interested in having us do it, we actually have a description of the service and everything here in the back with pricing and things like that. If you wanted to do it yourself, how many have ever done a drain and clean on the pond? Nobody's done it before? So, okay. So what we typically what we do is we set up a 600 to 1,000 gallon temporary tank. So it's huge tanks. If you were to do it yourself, you'd probably want to use a big kiddie pool or a big tank from Farm and Country or something like that, Tractor Supply, and move the water there. Keep the fish aerated. So we have an aerator that we'll put in there to keep oxygen going, cover it up so the fish don't get jumpy. And then it's just a matter of taking a 5-gallon bucket and just going down through the pond, rinsing everything off, and just getting rid of that big debris. We don't use a pressure washer, traditional pressure washer to do that. When we clean the pond, just like when we clean the biofilter, we are destroying the ecosystem of the pond. So we don't want to do it too often, but we want to get rid of that macro debris, the buildup of debris that's been building up over time. So the idea of the clean out is not to scrub, all that biofilm off the rocks. It's just to get the big debris. So let's say you neglected your pond and leaves that are building up on it like this on the bottom. You don't have a skimmer, things like that. We want to get that debris, out of the pond. If you were in the York area, you're using York water, you're going to have chlorine and chloramines in your water system. That's poisonous to fish. How many guys are members of pond and koi related Facebook groups? Anybody here? That's one person. Yeah. So I cruise through those sometimes. Not a lot. But somebody the other day was having an issue with a fish that was sick, and they said, "Oh no, you need to mix some chlorine and some water, and that'll cure the fish." It's like, are you crazy? this advice that you get out there. It's like, man, that's the worst thing you can do. That'll kill the fish. I've killed fish. We'll fill up a pond and we'll say, oh, I'll go back in a half hour and turn the hose off. Well, 2 days later, I forgot, and we come back and there's dead fish. It's not fun, So we always recommend having detox on hand, especially when you do the clean outs and that type of thing. This is 1 pump per 100 gallons of water, and it instantly gets rid of chlorine and chloramines and some heavy metals and that type of thing. So if you've owned a pond for any length of time, you're going to leave that garden hose on and you're going to forget. And you're going to come back 3 or 4 hours later. Yep, I've done it. Everybody's done it. So if you look around here at all the water spigots, they all have timers on them, 100% timers. And it's mostly because of me. And I'm not allowed to touch any water around here anymore. But Pond Detox instantly gets rid of that. So you always want to have some on hand when you do your clean outs, but always have it on hand, an empty bottle that's fresh or a full bottle that's fresh. So that way it's Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. There's no place open that you get your detox and so you can instantly dechlorinate it. But have some of that on hand. It'll save your fish. So Pond Detox is super important. So cool. All right. Any questions online? Are we back online yet?
Yep,
back online. Awesome. Good. All right. No questions though? Nope. Good. Awesome. Okay. So now we refilled the pond. We gently move the fish back in. We do have a few different nets that we use to move the fish. This is my favorite type of net to move fish with. It's nice and soft, so it's not going to use the fish scales are not going to get caught in here. It's a super tight weave. And so you let especially for a larger fish, you get the fish to go into there, you hold this end of the net, and then you gently move them over, from the tank to there, and then you release it. And the fish just gently slide out. So it's the best way to be moving fish is with a fish net like this. You can use, just a regular net, and then you're scooping the fish, and then the fish is flopping around in here and things like that. Fish are designed to be floating in the water, not hanging out in the air. So when they're in the air and they're flopping around, you can really break their skeletons and things like that. We see it a lot where the fish has a broken back, and that's probably because it was handled improperly when it was in the air. So using a nice koi net like that is a wonderful way to keep your fish happy. And you can get in there really tight and just hold the fish, so he doesn't move around and things like that with the nets that way. So great option. If you don't have one of those, we recommend picking that up that way. So now the fish are back in. We detoxed the pond, and we turned the waterfall back on, and everything's going good. But what did we do when we did this? We destroyed the whole ecosystem. So the first thing that we recommend is getting started with our pond starter bacteria. It's a quick, fast-acting bacteria. This beneficial bacteria exists in nature. It's all over the place. It's a natural product. Our bacteria come from bacteria colonies that came out of other ponds. So this is specifically geared towards getting your pond back up and running as quickly as possible. And so starting with that pond starter bacteria is the best way to do that. So the first thing is to detox the water, and then you get your bacteria going in there. With the bacteria, we recommend dosing once a week throughout the season then. So we don't need to add a ton of bacteria all the time, but just a tiny little bit of fresh bacteria throughout the entire season is going to keep the pond happy. As long as we have a large enough biofilter that has lots of nooks and crannies in there to grow bacteria, putting a couple pumps of that bacteria in once a week throughout the season is enough to keep the bacteria colonies healthy and fresh and growing. And we basically, again, we're starving the algae. Yes.
Are you just dumping the bacteria or pumping it right onto the biofilter, or are you putting it into the water?
Yep. So this has the little pump top, and what I typically recommend to customers is when you lift up the skimmer lid, and you empty that basket after you clean that basket, then just put it in the skimmer. So this is again 1 pump per 100 gallons. So if you have a 1,000-gallon pond, it's 10 pumps. If you have a 10,000-gallon pond, my thumb would get tired doing that, so we just go glug 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 glug. You can't overdose with our bacteria product. So if you accidentally went home and dumped 30 of these in your pond today, it's not going to hurt anything except your pocketbook. You don't, it doesn't. If you have a problem with green water and you're just, oh man, I want to get this pond cleaned up faster, you'd be tempted to dump 10 times as much as the recommended in there. It's not going to help. Double the dosage, okay, I can see that happening, but any more than double the dosage, you're not helping. So bacteria is going to grow at the level of the nutrients that are available, and so it has to slowly build up. Yeah. What string algae is different. So the two different types of algae in the pond. One is green water, green water is a single cell algae that if you reach your hand into the pond, your hand kind of disappears into the green water, into the greenness, but you can't really grab a hold of anything. There's nothing to touch. That's single cell algae, and so beneficial bacteria eats nitrites, and single cell algae eats nitrites. So when we put beneficial bacteria in, the bacteria is eating it up, so there's none left for the single cell algae. So this does a great job to get the water crystal clear because we're starving the algae. That's how that works. So if you remember we talked about the biofall, so it's ammonia in the bottom gets converted to nitrites, and then the bacteria in there eats the nitrites and converts it to nitrates. So it's the nitrates that feed the fuzzy, stringy, scummy type algae. Okay, so most of the time in our ponds, just having a great skimmer, having a great biological filter, adding your bacteria, that's enough to keep your fish perfectly happy. It's enough to keep the water crystal clear, but we do a great job of growing string algae. So stringy, fuzzy type algae, especially January, February, March, this period here where the pond is slowly starting to come alive. A lot of people are seeing green fuzziness all over the place. It's extreme. It's a lot. And the biggest reason is your plants aren't growing yet, because just like the bacteria starves the green water algae, plants, and in a couple weeks, these plant tables here will be filled with plants that we're growing in Dallastown. Our greenhouse is 100 degrees on an average day. So the plants are pushing strong, so it won't be too long till they're out here. But those plants eat those nutrients and starve the stringy, fuzzy type algae. So if you come in and say, hey, my fish are happy, my pond is crystal clear, but just everything is covered, with this green fuzziness, or on the waterfall, I get this green slime, kind of hanging down. The first thing we're going to recommend is plants. I think that was the first 5 things, right? A red leaf is going to take out a different nutrient than a green leaf. A round leaf, like a lotus or a lily, is going to take out a different nutrient than an iris leaf, which is kind of tall and sword-like. Something that blooms in May is going to take out a different nutrient than something that blooms in August. So we want to use variety, as much variety as you want. It looks awesome because we have variety, but it does a great job at starving the stringy, fuzzy type algae. So the first line of defense against stringy, fuzzy type algae is skim it. Skim that debris out, because that's where the debris starts. But then at the back end of that, plants. So start off with plants. On your plant tray, on top of the biofalls. If you don't have a plant tray, you can plant plants right in the top of the biofalls without a tray. Put a stream on the pond. Put a 20-foot stream on the pond. Load that stream up with plants. So that's a great way to do all your marginals. And then down in the pond itself, do some lilies and do some lotus and do some plants around the perimeter. So the more variety, the better. If you come in here at the end of May, we're going to have 150 different varieties of plants. Some tropical, some tall, some short, and all kinds of different colors. So have fun picking. Yeah. What percentage of the pond? How much is it covered? Yeah. So how do you know if you have too many plants? There's another way to ask that. If you can't see your fish, you have too many plants. And really that's the way I look at it, because we love putting plants in the pond. It's a beautiful thing to look at, all the plants, and the role that they play. Is they're sucking out the nutrients. So the more plants, the better. A lot of times, you don't want to put too many plants in the pond because you do want to enjoy your fish. And so we say, hey, do it in a stream or a waterfall, coming down there. But add plants, to your heart's content, until it's like, man, I just don't have any room for more plants, because I won't be able to see my fish. Yeah.
The tube that connects the skimmer and the fall,
yes.
How often does that get clumped up with the algae.
Okay,
It
so
doesn't.
you like the plumbing that comes out the back that way. So the plumbing that we use is a professional grade, flexible, black PVC. Goes up there. Typically, when we do the disconnect of the pump in the skimmer, that water back flushes out of the biofalls and back flushes down that line, and so we typically don't have any issues there. We are pre-filtering everything, in the skimmer. So that skimmer basket and that filter mat in there. So theoretically, you should never get anything in that pipe. So sometimes it happens in the wintertime where if you have it shut off, a frog will get down in here somehow and then work its way through that pipe. But then putting the pump back on it and blowing water through it, the frog takes a little ride and it comes out. So we typically don't have too many issues with that. So yeah, awesome. So that answer your question about plants. Yeah, cool, awesome. Any other questions about plants or the role they play right now? So okay. Good. We're doing okay online. Yep. Awesome. Good.
But plants should be out of the way of those. Basically, you got a current between the falls and the skimmer.
Right.
So plants should be out of the way of that. Correct?
Exactly. Yep. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. If we have too many plants and they're blocking the flow of the skimmer, let's say we plant a beautiful water lily right in front of the skimmer, which if you had seen our medium pond last year, we did have that issue where the beautiful lily was in there and it's like, oh, it's flowering. There's so many flowers on it. I don't want to trim it back, but it was trapping some of the debris, so that debris wasn't making its way into the skimmer. So eventually we did have to thin that out a little bit. So to kind of pay attention to that. And when we typically lay out a pond and do pond design, that's an important thing. It's like, we don't want to put a huge plant right in front of the skimmer. We do them around the perimeters and things like that. So, yeah, good point. So, awesome. Yeah.
So I also inherited a pond in the fall that I'm trying to figure out. So I pulled some of the plants out to try to clean some stuff out and just left them out. And my pond is pea soup green. When should I start putting more plants in? Should I start this month or should I wait until May?
Yeah, so you can do it now. Most of the time when we're constructing a pond and designing a pond, we're actually putting the plants down in plant pockets. So those plants are permanently installed in the pond. And so they'll come up when they're ready, and that we, you might read a Better Homes and Gardens article from the 1970s that says you have to raise and lower the plants or take plants out of the pond. We've never been a fan of that advice. We love the plants right down in there. We create little plant shelves, little plant pockets. So that plant is in the pond permanently. It's part of the ecosystem. The roots are right there to grab all the nutrients. And so we're not using a lot of containers. And also, who wants to look at containers? So it's like, when you do landscaping in front of the house, you don't leave stuff in the pots. You get rid of it. So that's our same philosophy on that. We do use a lot of tropical plants, so cannas and all kinds of different beautiful tropicals that don't survive the winter. So those kind of plants during fall service, they're going to be dead soon. We'll rip them out, throw them in the compost, and then you don't replant those until Mother's Day. After Mother's Day, because that's usually the frost time, around here. But other than that, and probably in about 2 weeks, we haven't pulled our plants out of the greenhouse yet because they're 100 degrees and we don't want to shock them with 30-degree weather. So in about 2 weeks, we're going to start to pull plants and have them on the tables out here. So that kind of gives you a little bit of guidance on when to do it. So we got teased last week with 70-degree weather and now we've got 20-degree weather this week. So, welcome to South Central Pennsylvania. Yeah. Awesome. Good. Okay. So, cruising right along here. Any questions? Good to go. Okay. Awesome. So we got the pond filled back up. We got the fish in there swimming around. We did our beneficial bacteria. We did our detox and then our beneficial bacteria. We fertilized our plants. We talked a little bit about stringy, fuzzy type algae. Right after we do the clean out, the pond looks immaculate. There's no lot of fuzziness. We got rid of all of that. It kind of dried up. We want to see that come back. We want to see a little bit of biofilm on those rocks. Totally normal, expected. If I ever go to a pond in the middle of May or middle of June and I don't see a little bit of green fuzziness on the rocks, I'm a little concerned that your ecosystem is not getting balanced. So we want to see a little bit of that green fuzziness on the rocks. If it's excessive, add more plants. But for the most part, we want to see that. So I always tell people, normal expected part of pond owning in a good ecosystem is having a little bit of fuzziness on the rocks. That way. I'll back up just a little bit. If you do your clean out and then you refill the pond and you stirred things up as you were refilling, because you refilled it fast, you can use rapid clear. It grabs soil particles together that might be suspended in the water and drops them out of the water column. So I always call this the garden show miracle, because when we do a garden show, that pond has to be clear the next day. So we'll add this in there, and it's like within 24 hours, it really drops all the soil out of things. It's a Band-Aid, but if you're having a party and your pond is cloudy, it's something to keep in mind. So rapid clear that way. And we did talk about our fertilizer tablets. Cool. All right. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up, if you decide that you're crazy enough to do your own clean out, and that we do recommend setting up the tubs. But if you don't want to set up the tub, or you don't have that, or the pond's just a little bit smaller, and you just want to do a little bit, we do rent these vacuums. Has anybody ever rented one before? No? All right. I was hoping one of you guys did, because you can demonstrate. All right. So this is this looks like a shop vac, and it kind of is. But the difference between this and a regular shop vac is as you're vacuuming, and you have all these different attachments that would go in there, and you're vacuuming the bottom of the pond, and you have different things here to control. So if you have gravel in the bottom of the pond, you're not sucking up the gravel into here. If you use it a regular shop vac, this is what, a 5-gallon shop vac. You'd be sucking up pond water, and as soon as that filled up, you'd have to stop it, dump it out, come back, plug it back in, do it again. This actually has 2 chambers to it. So as the first chamber is filling up, you're vacuuming, and then once that chamber fills up, it switches to the second chamber, and you continue to vacuum. You don't have to stop, and this automatically discharges the first chamber while you're vacuuming into the second chamber, and then it keeps going back and forth and switching between the two. So it's a great way to vacuum the bottom of the pond without having the headache of using a regular shop vac that way. You can actually discharge the debris into this mesh bag, and that'll catch everything. Or if you didn't want to capture that, you just say, hey, I'm just going to discharge it into the landscape. Then you can discharge it into the landscape as great compost. But if the water's pretty clear and you just want to capture a couple leaves and things like that, this is great. You can actually put this right on the edge of the pond, and you can just keep vacuuming without worrying about refilling the pond or anything later.
Where's the water going?
So it gets sucked in here, and then it has a discharge here on the back. So the discharge is on the back. Yep. So it'll fill up the chamber here, and then Becky, do you know how often, how long does it take to fill up a chamber in discharge? It's 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, so it's about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it'll discharge that out. But you don't even, unless you're watching it, you don't even know that it's happening. You just know that you're vacuuming.
So you just discharge it out into the grass, or
into a garden bed somewhere.
It's amazing fertilizer.
Exactly. Yeah. Fish waste is great fertilizer. Yeah.
So are you still emptying half the pond and taking the fish out before you use that?
So you can, if it's a larger pond, you can do that. But this would be a system that you wouldn't have to do that complete draining clean. That you could just do this and just vacuum the bottom.
You wouldn't suck a fish in.
Nope. So because you're having different, this is probably the most popular fitting that people are using, and you can adjust it. So a lot of our customers have rock and gravel in the bottom, so they'll just adjust this so it's smaller than the gravel, and so they'll just pop that on there, and now they're vacuuming the bottom of the pond just like that. So you're sucking in some of the debris without sucking in a fish or gravel or anything like that. So yeah.
So would you say kind of like every few years you did a major clean out, and this could be something as a maintenance, like every year or a couple times throughout the year?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do rent this as a daily rate. What's our daily rate?
The one thing I want to mention for this is that
wait for our online people.
hello.
This is Becky,
hello.
my business partner and wife.
So the only thing I'll mention for this is if you have a particularly sludgy pond, it's not good for that. It's meant to get some leaves out, some silt out, some things like that. So if you would try to use this on a, it will burn it up. I say that because it's happened. So it doesn't take the place of a complete clean out in any way, shape, or form. But if you're diligent about cleaning it throughout the year and things like that, and you just want to spot clean, or you just want to get some things off the bottom, it's perfect for that. And it's a great tool. We rent it by the day. It's $80 for one day. Pick it up in the morning or the night before and bring it back by 5. If you want it for the weekend, $160. Pick it up Friday night, bring it back, Monday morning or whatever. It's an inexpensive way to kind of keep up with it. And
what's the maximum depth you can vacuum? Like, you wouldn't want to use it in the pond 4 feet deep.
Correct. It's good in around the 2.5 feet area. One thing that if you do rent it, it's nice to have 2 people, one kind of wrangling this on the side and one doing the actual cleaning, because the last thing you want is that to go into the water. But it really is great, and the stuff that comes out of your pond will make your flowers grow like 3 times as they would normally grow, because fish waste is very fertile. So, but it's a great tool. We have 2 of these. You just call up and you just say, hey, I would like to reserve it, and we'll get you on the list, and you can have at it.
Is there a discharge hose?
Yes. Yep. So
okay, I see it now.
Yeah, this is our discharge hose here, and it plugs into. It'll plug into there, and then you can put this discharge. If it's clear water, just put it into this bag so you're capturing the debris, and then you can just let that water go back into the pond. If it's kind of muddy water that you're vacuuming out and you don't want it to go back into the pond, just discharge it into the landscape entirely, and then you can skip the mesh bag entirely.
A lot of people skip that mesh bag if you do have a lot of really fine stuff, because it fills up quickly, and it's sort of hindering your progress because you're constantly pulling that bag off and rinsing it out. It is good for leaves and the bigger debris, but sometimes that not more harm than good, because it does collect everything, but you're constantly
it adds to your work.
It adds to your workload. Yes. So,
good. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice to have a guest speaker every once in a while.
Now, are they available to buy?
They are available to buy. What's the retail price on these? They're pricey.
Let me just go look.
Yeah, she'll look that up and yep. So, but they're it's world's most expensive shop vac, but if you've ever used it, it's great. But that's why we started renting them, because they're so expensive to buy, that one. So
If we're in the middle of cleaning it, you get called out on the call, we got to stop.
yeah, so it's definitely possible to do it yourself that way. Any questions on cleaning, that type of thing, or any other spring type of thing?
And that, say you clean every 2 years, every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a good thing in between.
In between, yeah. If you're pretty meticulous and you're taking care of the pond and not really ignoring it for 3 months in the winter, like some of our customers seem to do, that's just a great way to say, hey, you know what, I just got some leaves on there, but I don't think I need a full clean out. We just did that last year, so you can use that this year, in that type of case. Awesome, good. So that's kind of our process for doing that spring flush. We're mimicking nature, that the snow melts in the mountains and just washes out the streams. That's what we're doing. Now, we talked about adding your pond starter bacteria to get going. Once you get going with that, we do recommend actually switching to our auto doser unit. Anybody familiar with this? Is this kind of new for everybody? Cool. So this is something that we started using probably about 3 years ago. Prior to that, we would recommend that you switch to our regular beneficial bacteria, and once a week on Saturdays you go out, or Sundays, whatever, to pick a day, and just put this in once a week. With our dosing unit, the bacteria comes in a little bag. The bag goes inside the unit, down here like this. This little straw goes down into the bag, and then it has a little controller and a little motor that actually just spins around here, and then this black tube, you put it into the pond, and so it drips. Just a little drip 24/7, or not 365 because you can't use it in the winter, but 24/7 throughout the season, and it's constantly adding a tiny little drip of bacteria. On a small pond, this little bag is enough to last you the whole season. On a larger pond, you probably need a couple of bags that way. They're $20-some. But doing it that way, you don't ever have to worry about adding your own bacteria, forgetting it on a Sunday morning or whatever. This automatically does it for you. And what we found is that constant little, you're actually probably using less water treatment in this than you are buying the bottles. But what we found is that with this, it adds that extra little polish to the pond. It does a fantastic job that you're just constantly putting that tiny little drip down in the water that way. So if you're interested in that, that's a great way to automatically
get buried.
Yeah, great question. So you can mount it. It does have mounting hooks. So you can mount it on a post or something like that. 90% of the time, we're burying it up in the ground up to there, and then we're putting one of our fake rocks on top of it to cover that up. So we have these small boulders, and so we just put that on top just to hide it.
Like we did with our
Yeah, exactly. And we have lots of different sizes of these guys, but that's a great way to do that. I'm not going to do that with the real rocks we have.
I was waiting for you to pick up a real one.
Yeah. So that's our doser unit. That way. The other thing I mentioned too is if you decide to DIY, your clean out and not do the full thing. Using the vacuum is a great way to do it. Also using a sludge and filter cleaner. This is a natural bacteria again. You can't overdose in your pond. You can't put too much of this in. This will help eat up a little bit of that excess sludge that did build up on the bottom of the pond. So let's say, hey, we're going to schedule that vacuum, for 2 weeks from now. Go ahead and get some of this. Put this in there. This is going to start breaking up some of that muck and debris. So that way, when you do the vacuum, it's a little bit more of a polish. So using the sludge cleaner is a great way to kind of enhance that the DIY cleanup. So
everything 1 pump per 100 gallons.
Most of our water treatments are 1 pump per 100 gallons. If you get to some of our larger features, we have larger bottles. It's 1 pump for 500 gallons and different things like that. But for the most, and then we have our big lake treatments that are a little bit different. But most of the treatments in this size bottle are going to be 1 pump per 100. And you can't overdose. So it's not like a dangerous chemical to put in there. So cool. All right. So we talked about that. So now we have our ecosystem kind of getting established and getting going. The water's staying nice and clear. The fish are staying happy. We don't want to start feeding those fish until that water temperature is consistently above 55 degrees. So 55 degrees is the magic number. So we do recommend having a pond thermometer. It floats in the skimmer. It has a little string on it, and just float it in the skimmer so that way you know what the pond temperature is. Below 55 degrees, the reason that's kind of a magic number, the fish might be swimming around. Like I've seen the fish swimming around in my pond when it's 35 degrees and there's this much ice on the pond, and they're still swimming around down there because they don't hibernate. They go into a state called torpor, which is where their metabolism slows down to almost nothing. And if you gave them food, they would come up, because they're in the habit of doing that, they would ingest the food, and the food would just sit in their bodies and just rot. And we don't want that to happen. It's not good for the fish. So that's why we say below 55 degrees, don't feed your fish. Now, as we're starting to get into spring, we're starting to see these temperatures. On the average, we're getting closer to that 55. We're not there yet. We're probably maybe another month, away. At least 2 to 3 weeks. And then when we start feeding the fish, we start with 2 different things. One recommendation we have is probiotic food. The fish haven't eaten since the fall, and so their energy levels are a little bit lower. Their metabolism is a little bit lower, and they just can't fight off some of the pests and diseases that are waking up in the pond as well. So we start off with the probiotic food that helps them basically heal themselves from the inside and just gets them off to a good start. So we love the probiotic food. The other thing that we love to do is give them high nutrient food. So food that's high in vitamin C and different things like that. And so we love our koi crunchies for that. Anybody ever use the koi crunchies? No, so these are great. So they're a little bit bigger size, and if you want to hand feed your fish, This is a great way to learn how to hand feed your fish. But even if you have smaller fish, you can take these and you can crunch them up. But these are very easy food for them to pass through their systems. So it's a good thing to start in the spring and the fall. But it's high in vitamin C and things like that. So I love suggesting koi crunchies. And then we do have another food, we call it our cold water food, and that is a food that's high in wheat germ type ingredients. That again, it's not the high growth, high color summer formula that kind of sticks in their gut for a while. It allows them they can eat it and it passes through pretty quickly. So that's what we're looking for in the springtime. It's just to kind of ease them back into the habit of eating. Once we start seeing water temperatures consistently above like 60 degrees, 65 degrees, so the end of May, June, July, August, through the whole summer, then we can switch to a high color food or a high growth food, something with a lot more nutrients that really enhances their colors and enhances their energy levels and things like that. So, but for the spring, we're going to stick with probiotic, we're going to stick with cold water food, and maybe some koi crunchies and stuff like that. Make sense? Oh.
That's $4.99 to buy the unit. $4.99.
$499? Okay. So this unit here retails for $499. Awesome. Okay, so we chatted about getting fish started. Yeah.
Last couple of days we were chasing each other around like greedy.
Yes.
That's what's happening at this time of the year.
Yes, especially if you've got Barry Manilow music going on in the background and things. No, yeah. So people always ask, where did fish babies come from? It's like biology, 6th grade. No, so the females always have eggs, in their bodies, but whenever there's an environmental stressor, so one environmental stressor is a change in temperature, in the pond. So coming out of winter and going into summer, when we get a hot day, yeah, that's an stressor. So the female says, hey, I'm going to start to lay some eggs, and the boys are chasing her around. As your fish get a little bit bigger, it can be crazy aggressive. Especially when you see a koi pond this big with some spawning going on. Yeah, that's what's happening. So this time of year, you're going to see fish eggs in the pond. You're going to see frogs, toads, spring peepers. I don't know if anybody noticed the noise is starting to coming out of the pond the past week or not. But yeah, that's what's happening. So yeah, and it can happen other times too. If you come in and buy new fish from us. And we put them in a bag, and you're taking them home and put them in your pond. That's a change in environment, so that's a stressor. So it's a lot of times it's very common for customers to come in, a month or two later. It's like, I don't know where these babies came from, but I only bought 2 fish, and now we because that's an environmental stressor. So those are kind of the two things. So they can spawn multiple times a year. It's not just now. But, yeah.
What do you do with the babies?
Build a bigger pond. That's always going to be my answer. So, yeah. There's no such thing as too many fish. There's such a thing as having a pond that's too small. So, yeah.
Now I know where you get your fish from. Huh?
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Good. Any other questions? Awesome. Good. We covered a lot of ground. We didn't talk about gloves. Those are awesome, insulated. We were using those yesterday in freezing cold temperatures. If you do have fish health issues, we talked about fish spawning, but this time of year, the fish are just starting to come awake, but a lot of times some of those parasites and different things that affect the fish waking up a little bit faster than the fish do, and so their metabolism and their immune systems are kind of really slowed down. Pond salt is our number one go-to, so if you call in with a fish health issue, probably say, hey, send us some pictures, see what's going on. And we have a little assessment that we would go through to try to help identify it. But 80% of the time, this is where we end up going is treating with pond salt, and you can really knock off a lot of issues with that. Yeah, so cool. Well, I can sit there and talk your ears off all day long. But if there's any other questions,
I got one stupid question because I've had huge aquariums most of my life.
Yeah.
What's the one mistake people with aquariums make when they go over the ponds?
Yeah, so
so
the science is the same. The science is the same. It's ammonia, nitrite, and nitrates. You can get down really into the weeds on all kinds of different levels, your pH levels and your phosphate levels and your KH level, all these different things. So a lot of times people with aquariums are used to doing all of these different tests. If we build a pond for you, I rarely recommend that you buy a test kit. And because it's a larger body of water, and a larger body of water is going to be more stable, than a smaller body of water. So the larger, the better. And just let your pond tell you what's going on.
Yeah, because I knew that with fish tanks, the smaller they are, the more work they are.
Yeah.
The bigger ones, they just maintain themselves.
Yep, absolutely. So so it's the same technology, with our 10x10 pond as it is with the 2-acre pond that we built a couple years ago. So it's the same thing happening. It's just a little bit different scale. So we just need to make sure that we're following the right procedures with making sure we got a lot of oxygen in the pond. We have good beneficial bacteria going on, and that. So yeah, awesome. Did you have a question?
The number of fish I found changes, but I never seen it floating.
Okay.
Where do they go?
Well, have you ever seen the walking fish? The ones. No, so where do the fish go? Who knows? There are birds that fly around, so we actually, on any given day, you'll see a bald eagle fly right over our store. They live about half a mile that way on the other side of the Route 30 bridge. They'll fly low and slow over the store. And on the other side of the interstate is there's some lampposts from the old high school, in Newark. So the bald eagles will fly low and slow and rest over there. Just walk 100 yards to the Cadorus right over here. You'll see heron, walking up and down there eating fish.
So in other words, put a trail cam up.
Right. So there's predators all around, and so maybe it's a predator. That's getting the fish, especially if we're not finding the bodies, floating into the skimmer or anything. So luckily we don't have any issues. They fly around, but we haven't had anybody land and actually cause any issues. So yeah.
I think all the crane are coming to my house because I had a crane that's basically eating fish every morning in October, and I know there's fish scattered in my yard.
Yeah.
And we dropped some of them.
That's no fun.
It probably was okay because I think my pond was overpopulated. But should we be doing anything to prevent it? Like, it's stuff I can be planning for now just to keep them coming back.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that we do after, if you buy fish from us, we follow you home and we actually release a heron right there. No, it's no fun to lose fish. But if you see in the diagram here, we do build fish caves, into the side of the pond, and so that's a place that they can go. If the heron comes and scares the fish, boom, they can go down into the fish cave. So all of our ponds have that built into it. If your pond doesn't have that built in, this is actually a fish cave. So it's kind of a cool little thing, to do it yourself. You can just drop it right in, and then the fish, can just kind of hang out in here until they feel safe again, and they can go back up. We sell fake alligator, which floats in the pond. It kind of moves around, and a lot of the heron are like, all right, I'm not getting close to that to see if that guy's real or not. We sell fake koi, so they kind of float in the pond. So if the heron comes in, he's going to go after the slowest moving fish in the pond. Boom, he gets a sore beak because it goes after this fake one, and then it gives your fish a chance to go into the cave. So there's some things out there that you can try to do to outsmart the birds, but with the stinking birds, we call them the evil birds around here. Yeah.
So I think I have the same problem. I have way too many fish. Is there a way to take them, get rid of them? Is there someone?
Yeah. So
I don't want to kill you.
Yeah. No, it's a common thing, and I always throw out the suggestion to make the pond bigger. But we don't take fish in regularly. We do have a couple programs out there. One of them is called Ponds for Kids. We'll actually go into local schools, and the kids come out, and we build a pond for the school, so they get this cool little environment. The school actually pays for the material at cost, and then we donate our time to go do it. But they're always, in those cases, they're looking for donated fish. So if you do have a situation where it's like, I got some fish, and I'd like to donate, the next time you have a Ponds for Kids thing, call me. So if you were to, contact us and have your name on the list there, when we're looking for donations and stuff like that, yeah, we'll do that. The one thing I ask everybody is don't release those fish into the wild. Don't say, oh yeah, they'll be fine in the Cadorus, or the Susquehanna. Doing that, you're introducing a non-native species in there, and there's been areas where this hobby's been shut down. You can't have a pond in your backyard because people have released them into the wild. So please don't do that. Don't want to start anything like that.
Sushi.
But yeah, right.
Just kidding.
Yeah. I don't know how good goldfish would taste, but yeah, right. Not much meat on that one. But, yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, what other questions you guys have? Good. Awesome.
Oh, they breed that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between goldfish and koi? So so if you were to look at our fish tanks in here, we'll have a koi in this tank and goldfish in this tank. They could be very, very similar colors. Like this could be orange and white, and then you have an orange and white over here. It's like, I don't know, they look the same to me. It's little whiskers, right at the edge of the mouth. We call them barbels. So koi have them, goldfish don't. So that's the easiest way to tell the difference. Over time, koi will live longer. Koi usually get bigger and things like that. But when the fish are this big, that's what you can look for is the barbels.
I never get more than about 4 inches,
Yeah, so probably goldfish.
but I don't fish them.
Yeah. So probably goldfish. A 10 to 12 inch goldfish is a big goldfish. They typically don't even get that big. Most of them are going to stay in that 4 to 6 inch range or something like that. So yeah.
What's the price for the full deep clean? And could you guys come like later in the summer, or do you have to do it in the spring?
I like doing it in the spring before the ecosystem is really getting established. So if we go in and if it's really bad, all right, we'll do it in July or August or something like that. But I really like doing it, before, kind of June 15 is kind of like, man, we're getting into summer. The plants are growing, the ecosystem's kind of there. Unless it's really bad, let's not do it, now. But as far as pricing goes, we actually do have the pricing in the book here based on the size. So it's on page 21. And you didn't get a book.
Yeah, this year. Oh my God, this is time.
Yeah, the books are $50, but no. But yeah, just grab one of those, and then to get on the schedule, we have a web form that you can just put your info and send some pictures, and then we can help you determine what the costs and stuff are and get it scheduled and things like that. So yeah, so cool. Did you have a question?
Yep.
Yeah.
I know koi and goldfish are gluttonous pigs, and they will eat till they can't eat anymore.
Yeah.
How often do you recommend feeding them?
Yeah. So how often do you recommend feeding them? So if you have a skimmer and you throw fish food in, and that skimmer is doing its job, it's going to suck that fish food into the skimmer basket. So my first answer is throw as much food as they'll eat before it gets sucked into the skimmer. So usually that's a minute or two. So just throw a little bit in.
I mean, like daily or just a couple times a week?
Yeah. So here at the store, we probably feed once a day. Probably. Yeah. So I'm not. They don't let me here too often. On Saturdays. And then they're happy when I leave, right? But they feed about once a day. My pond at home, probably once a day. Sometimes they get fed in the morning. Sometimes they get fed in the morning, afternoon. If it's a Saturday and we have people over, it's a great fun thing to constantly throw food in. As long as those fish are eating and it's not getting sucked into the skimmer, feed as often as you want. As long as you have a good filtration system. A lot of times people will come in and they have their ponds full of green water and they're feeding every single day. And I'll say, all right, let's slow down the feeding. Let's only do the feeding twice a week till we get the beneficial bacteria growing in your biofilter, until we get that green water under control. Because the more food that you put in there, the more waste is happening. And the more you need more beneficial bacteria. So if you don't have ample biofiltration, let's say it's really tiny, don't overfeed. My personal pond at home, my filter is about 10 feet by 15 feet. So I can overfeed as much as I want. So because I can grow as much beneficial bacteria as I want, and it'll do a great job. Yeah.
From online, someone said, why does my pond attract so many frogs, and is there anything you can do about it?
Yeah, so this time of year, frogs are everywhere. So if you build it, they will come. I know we have some green frogs, leopard frogs, spring peepers, hanging around my pond, and I love this time of year when they're starting to come awake and that. But they can make a lot of racket. It doesn't last for very long, So yeah, if you have a pond, it's part of the pond ecosystem. So yeah. Awesome. That answers your question. Good. All right. Anything else? Good. Well, awesome. Well, thanks, guys, for coming. And if you have any questions, again, we've got a lot of information on our website, just /supplyco.com. Click on the Learning Center button at the top. Jenny has done a fantastic job of creating pretty much any question that you have about a pond. It's type in a keyword. It'll pull up any of the answers that we have on there. We're working on getting more video and stuff on there. But if there's a question that's not on the website, call, stop in. Love to help get everybody relaxed next to their beautiful ponds. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.